Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. Michael Sapersky here, and today I'm very excited to have MaryBeth Maskovas joining me. MaryBeth, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me.
So MaryBeth, you're an analytics and optimization consultant. You work with clients in e-commerce, retail, SaaS, B2B, food and beverage. So kind of a wide range. You're the founder of Insight Lime Analytics. So it's a data strategy consultancy. And you started that in September of 2020. Just kind of fun note is that in your first year of business, you received a 100 NPS score from your top 5 clients, if I'm not mistaken. So, and the great job on the research team, if that is accurate. So I want to get into that. For those aren't familiar, NPS, Net Promoter Score, right, is a score of the satisfaction kind of levels of your clients. And that's a very, very, very high, almost unusually or just a number that you never even hear. So it's interesting, obviously a small sample size, but I want to get into some of the best practices that have led to that and really how you've gone from just getting started not that long ago to building up a business with a team and a lot of good things happening. So before we get into all that, let's kind of go back in time a little bit because I believe you were recruited into a custom software company or digital agency as a marketing analyst, and that happened as you were doing an evolutionary biology degree. So take us from evolutionary biology degree to getting into marketing analytics. What happened there? What was going on in your life at that time?
Yeah, it was it is definitely kind of, when you hear it by itself, sounds like, wait, how are those two things related? So I was studying eBio at University of Colorado. And the part where it starts to make sense is that the eBio degree at University of Colorado, at least when I took it, has a pretty heavy statistical background. And you learn how to program in R, and there's a lot of focus on experimental design. And I was someone who worked all the way through my college. And some of the things were odd jobs, like working at a doggy daycare, but I kept going back to these kind of marketing related jobs. I got a horticulture internship, and then I started looking at their digital strategy. It just kept happening. And so when this software company, they were a little bit ahead of the game, I think, in identifying that, like, okay, marketing is going to go into a place where you need data skills. And so they were like, we want you to look at things like paid advertising from this hard science background. And it's actually a pretty funny story. My 2 options was I had that offer kind of on the table, and I was looking at this job where I would go move to Davis and I would census dead bats for a living. So it would be like, a night job, and would be kind of furthering my career. And then I would probably go and get, a PhD or something in biology. And it was a hard decision, even though it sounds like some people would be like, yeah, gross. But I decided to go with the marketing analytics. So I was really curious, and I was interested in digital and things like that. And so that's kind of the long and short of it, of how I ended up there. And it just was a great fit. And I fell into the world of consulting right away and started interacting with the clients directly a lot sooner than I thought I would, and just ended up really finding that was a fulfilling career for me.
It's what would you say, like, when you're at that point where you were going to either go off and census bats or do some research around bats? I mean, if you did that, you would have been the first person that I would have met that was doing that kind of role. So that would have been unique. But what actually like ultimately pulled you over to the direction of analytics and marketing? Like, was there something inside of you that, or was it more financially related? Like, what was the real deciding factor that pulled you in that direction as opposed to the other one?
The money is definitely one part of it. Like, you make a lot more money there, but that's really not the bottom line. When you're in a specialized biology degree and like career, you have to get super, super specialized. So you start to get more and more granular, and you're focusing studying one animal for a really long time, a period of time. And I was always too interested in everything else to have that be my main focus. So I acknowledged that in myself, and I realized that going in a path of digital, there was a lot of different areas you can explore. And even marketing in itself or data in itself has so many specializations. So I just knew that I would be a lot more fulfilled and entertained doing that than going super specialized into biology.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, so let's fast forward now a few years. September of 2020, we are in a COVID is taking over the world. It's maybe not what you'd consider to be the ideal time to launch your own consulting business, but you did that. Walk us a little bit back even from that time. How long were you thinking about starting your own consulting business before you actually pulled the trigger in September of 2020, and kind of what was going on to that point?
Yeah, this is definitely an interesting time and an interesting story. So I had been thinking about starting my own business, wasn't sure if it would be consulting for quite some time. It was always a kind of a curiosity of mine. And prior to 2020 and COVID, I was living in Copenhagen, where I had lived for about 5.5 years. I was working for a consulting firm there, where I was starting to get quite senior, and I was touching some really large clients and really driving what sorts of products we were offering. And I was having a lot of ideas like, oh, wow, this is something. And the firm that I was at focused a lot more on implementation, and I was much more interested in the insight side. And I was like, okay, I think I could do this. And I was starting to see how an agency really run. And then COVID happened, and I was already planning on repatriating to the US, but we had to emergency move. So my partner and I had to move several months sooner than we were thinking. We actually ended up getting rid of all of our stuff and moving in 2 weeks and coming to the US and staying at my parents' house. And we're trying to figure out what to do then. And I was actually still consulting with eCapacity, waking up at 5 a.m. and kind of doing some work with them. And that was when I got the completely wrong job at the wrong time. I was recruited into a company, and I won't name any names, but it wasn't really what they advertised, and I was super unhappy. And that's when I was like, you know what, this is a perfect time to start over. And I had been doing a side hustle for a while, where I had one client that was quite large that I had been doing some digital advising for. And I got a business coach, and she said, you have no business working for somebody else. And that was kind of the kick in the butt that I needed. And so I said, all right, I'm going to quit this job, and I'm going to, give it my all instead of having it as kind of a side thing. So the timing, I was a little nervous about it being COVID, but luckily, since I was so specialized into the world of e-commerce and things like that, there was, this kind of discrepancy where some businesses were really going ahead and others were being held back. And, I think I was just fortunate that a lot of my clients were that had even more demand for my services during that time.
Yeah, I want to get more into that and kind of explore how you ran with that idea and what you did initially when you launched the business. But before we go there, let's talk about your time in Copenhagen working for this larger, more established consulting firm. You mentioned that you moved up the ranks fairly quickly. What lessons did you take away from that you feel you've been able to apply most to your own consulting business? Like, is there just anything in their approach of how they did work, or how they got clients, or how they price projects? What would you say were kind of like the big lessons learned that you feel really gave you maybe an advantage or an edge or just confidence to start your own business?
There's definitely a lot of things. If you're in Denmark and you're looking for a firm, I still would highly recommend them. One of the biggest takeaways that I had at that point was that even when you're consulting with something like data, what really matters is the relationships with the people in the firm that you're working with. That's what drives everything forward. You could be the best analyst in the world, but if you're not great at managing those relationships and understanding the dynamics in a company, it's a lot harder to make things happen. And that's one of the ways that eCapacity really focused on doing their work was, one, they were really focused on what made sense for the stakeholders that they had in that company. But on the consulting side as well, they were interested in bringing in people with a really wide background. So they would recruit somebody because of a specific interest that they had or specialization, and then they would really build the packages around that. So it'd be like, okay, well, we know we have this person who's an expert in MarTech, and we know they're perfect for this one client. And I think that was a really valuable thing to be like, you can't just like cookie cutter everything like that. And you can't cookie cutter the projects either. It depends a little bit on the dynamics of the company.
Is there an example where, you talk about the relationship being so important, and I think most people recognize that is a very true statement, yet it's not something that a lot of people actually spend a lot of time thinking about, like, how do I make, or what is the process to make a relationship a stronger one, or one where there is higher levels of trust? in your experience during that time, what were you doing, or what did you see the firm do that you felt was like a real best practice that really helped to create those stronger, more trusting relationships?
Yeah, I think that one thing is that they, in all of the ways that they talked about themselves, and even when we were talking internally as a group, it was all about how can you be an advisor or trusted advisor. So prioritizing that over the sale, or like the project that you want to sell next. And how you do that is developing some core coaching skills, which is around being a good listener, taking that and taking the time also to get to know a client beyond just what their role is. I think sometimes we want to divide the professional and the personal, but that's not really how we work as humans. And so those concepts really help you get to the next level. If you have a client, if you're getting new into a project and you don't know the client that well, taking a few minutes to just listen to them and wait until they're ready to move forward with talking business is like a really simple core step to getting to that next level and able to really give advice that they'll listen to.
Yeah. All right. So now let's come back to you launching your own business. It's only been a couple of years or so, and no, not even 2 years yet from I think the time of this recording. But you have a team already. I mean, you have. So I'd like to better understand, like, what is the structure of the team? Are they contractors? Are they full time? And then how soon from the time that you launched your business did you start actually building a team around you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So right now we are 4 people, counting myself. They're all full-time employees except for one who is a full-time contractor. And it grew out of my like scope of one person pretty quickly as a business. I ended up landing a very big client sooner than I was really imagining that it would happen. And that's when I made my first hire in, I think it was about September 2021. I hired my admin kind of like agency ops person,
Right.
which was really like, the key first hire for me. And right now what we have is one analytics consultant and one consumer insights branding consultant and myself, and then an admin. And that structure is mostly based on demand right now. So it's like we're trying to grow sustainably while we put in place where we know we're going to have the next demand. So, we needed someone to do more of the like hardcore analysis. And so that's when we hired our next analytics consultant, who's a little bit more specialized than data science than myself.
Yeah, I mean, bringing on the like the assistant or the VA can be so powerful to unlock like bottle locks and potential. And we wrote an article about this, just kind of breaking down. It's on the blog for those that want to check it out, on the Consulting Success blog, about hiring your first assistant and the steps to go through. But for you specifically, like, why did you make that your first hire? What were you aiming for or hoping for that would allow you to do?
So I can't really take the credit for this one. I work really closely with a business coach, and I wanted to hire another expert consultant as my first hire. And she told me, if you do that, you're going to spend all of your time managing this other consultant's work instead of doing your own work. You need to hire an administrative assistant. And I was really resistant at first, but I followed her advice because every time that I have, it's gone really well for me. And what it really did is it frees up your core time to spend on the things that were going to make you the most money, because then I'm not worrying about things like what's the P&L like, or, do we have the right equipment? All of that is kind of handled for me. And I was lucky enough to find someone who also has a lot of that logistics experience that can help manage things and say, hey, this is what our capacity is like. And really, I can't recommend highly enough that should be one of your first hires before you start loading on more expert consultants.
And is there something that you looked for, or something that you did in that hiring process to ensure that like this was the right person, they would bring the right values or culture or skill set, or just like any lessons learned or any mistakes that you made looking back when like, wow, I wish I didn't do that? Just anything you could share that might help people to stay on track and not veer off on some random road?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think I know that I say I really recommend working with a business coach, but my business coach also specializes in this hiring process. So I actually hired an administrative assistant expert to help me with this process. So she helped craft the job description for me and actually did the initial screening calls and then would recommend people based on that and guided me through the whole process. And I really recommend doing something like that if you have the budget for it, because I didn't really know what to look for in an admin person. I didn't know like what skills it was because it's so different from my own. And then the other part is that like an administrative assistant is like a very close to you role. So you need to make sure it's somebody who will complement your personality type and your ways of working, and can work with that, because and be honest with yourself about who you are and who you're going to be, because there's certain people that, you know, wouldn't be a great admin for you, but they're a great admin in general.
Was there any kind of like test or assessment or, you know, a small initial project or something that you did that helped you to verify and kind of validate, like, yeah, this person is the right one, and kind of, you know, just to get them to leap over that hurdle before you invested more, or just what was that like for you?
The way that I like, and this is what I use for all of the consultants and not just the admin, is that I like behavioral style interviewing where you're asking for specific examples. And then this is once again, not my process, but still recommend it. I also use a DISC assessment, which is a personality type assessment, to create more questions. So it's not necessarily about what the DISC itself says. It's what questions you ask based on that, because everybody has strengths and weaknesses that are kind of the base part of the personality. So if you ask some guiding questions, you can understand like how self-aware is this person. So that's how I got a really good feel for those pieces. And I also made sure to ask questions about situations I know that an admin would get into with me just based on my personality type. And I think that helped be really revealing. Like, will this person, you know, be offended by how direct I am, or are they going to be fine, and things like that, just to make sure that they're the right fit.
What would be a red flag for you, like a big no-no that it would pop up and it would be like, yeah, I'm not going to move forward with this person? Is there anything that you really look for that would turn you off from hiring them?
Yes. And I think some of these are kind of, you know, your personal triggers or whatever, however that goes. But I did have a few people that when I asked a question about a situation where you gave somebody feedback, if somebody said something where they weren't able to acknowledge their own position in a situation and how they contributed to a problem, that's always a red flag for me. The same for if somebody doesn't want to admit that they made a mistake and explain how they corrected it. Those are two where, like, if somebody says something like, oh, I never make mistakes or something like that, I'm looking for people who are super open and engaged and like ready for feedback. And not saying that, you know, someone who is that way won't be good at a job ever, but at least for us, it would be like a big barrier for us to get to where we need to be.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great example. We've used a similar question as part of our hiring process as well. And you know, it's interesting to see how some people will essentially try and kind of deflect it and say like, yeah, you know, I did something, and another person will completely own it and say, I felt so bad. Here's what I did. Here's what I, you know, made sure of that it would never happen again. And it's just, it can tell you a lot. So I think that's a really great one to make sure that people, you know, are including or thinking about. So you have gone the team route in terms of building your firm and your business. Why do that? I mean, I know you mentioned you had like one big opportunity that maybe came at you sooner than you expected, but there's a lot of consultants out there that, you know, make the transition from being an executive or senior kind of role or corporate or whatever it might be into consulting, and they never want to manage a person again, right? They left that world because they didn't want to manage others. Yet there's a lot of kind of, you know, ceilings that you can hit and issues that can come up. So for you, why not, even though you had that larger opportunity, why not remain a solo independent consultant? Why did you intentionally choose to build a team?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I have some strong feelings about this one. I've done some posts about it before, and there's a few different pieces. One was that I don't want to spend my whole, even though I love consulting, I don't want to spend the rest of my career being a consultant at 75% billable. And maybe that's because I've also been in the consulting world this whole time. I've had a few roles internal, but mostly I've been a consultant. So for me, it's like, I know how hard it is to be that high of a billable percent, and how there's a ceiling for how much you can make, even if you keep moving your billable rate up, you're going to want to supplement with something, whether it's, writing a book or something like that. But for me, it was more about, I had a lot of dreams about building a team. And I looked at other agencies that I was in, and I saw how successful of a model that could be, and that I could transition into, in the future, a director role, and see other people grow into consulting. The other part of that is that I have seen some firms that rely a lot on subcontractors to do work.
Mm-hmm.
And that just didn't fundamentally fit with this ethos I have about the business and how to create a really trusted advisor position. And a lot of the pain points that I hear from my clients, where they're like, I can't trust my marketing agency, and I can't trust this. And the term I use is, nobody wants a piece of a piece. And a lot of times consulting firms will subcontract out somebody and they'll bill them at their regular rate. But it's somebody who's a little bit more junior or something like that. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to make sure that I was being super transparent about who it was that was going on, and if I sold the project a certain way, that's who you were going to get. So that was kind of the two aspects of why I ended up wanting to go with a team.
Yeah. Well, that takes us, okay, so right into the kind of the next question that I had for you. So that's a beautiful setup, which is, with your team, how do you ensure that your team does great work, right? I mean, a lot of consultants, as they make that transition, we work with many people who are doing that, from going from a solo consultant to building a team and starting to scale and grow their business. But one of the initial concerns that many people have is, how do I really ensure that the delivery will still be at the level that, that I can do, and clients are hiring me because of my expertise? How do I bring in others and make sure that we're still delivering at that level, if not even better? What are your thoughts around that? How do you do that in your own company, around delivery and just consistency and quality?
It's definitely one of the hardest things to scale when you're scaling a team. Ooh, it's hard. I think one of the keys is being able to take how you consult and make it tangible. So say, all right, well, what is it about the way I consult? What is my brand, pretty much? And writing that down and then making training out of it is I think one of the core pieces of that. So it's like, okay, well, how do I run calls? How am I doing these things that clients like so much? And I don't take my new consultants and let them have full access to a client right away. It's a very long training process where we, in the beginning, are doing some mock projects together, and then they sit in on a lot of calls, and then I start to give them certain pieces of the calls. And I think it takes a little bit more patience to really keep that level of quality, but it's partially about the training, and then also about the vision of here's why we do this, and here's why it's so important. And then the third aspect is that I also have everybody in my company go through a leadership course when they begin in the company. And my plans are to continue with a coaching course as well, for people who want to end up with a lead position and things like that. So that you're building this whole core of not only consulting excellence and then core excellence in whatever their specialization is, but also how to be that trusted advisor in the way of being as a person.
And how do you do you have a schedule for how you communicate this? I mean, in terms of not just the onboarding process, but even just the ongoing leadership and mentoring? Are you having conversations with your team about this stuff on a daily basis? Is it a weekly basis, a quarterly? Kind of take us through what the structure looks like.
Yeah, we have a few different cadences. So the leadership course that I currently have everyone go through is about 4 months. And during that period, they're having a lot of feedback with the separate company that we use for this. And then we also do have a plan in the beginning that's a ramp up period that has a lot of core consulting competencies, and we check in on that on a weekly basis. And also we do reviews, and now we're going to do it actually biannually. So instead of just an annual review where it's not just me reviewing each employee, it's also everyone reviews each other. We'll have a feedback survey, so it's kind of everyone has a say. But one thing I think is really important is that feedback needs to be continuous, not just when something's wrong.
Right.
So every week there's a dedicated time for every employee where we sit down and we have a one-on-one, and they give me feedback once they're comfortable. Sometimes it takes a little while. And I'm saying, I saw how you did this project. Here's what we would do differently. And if there's opportunity, also starting to coach instead of just train or tell.
Yeah, that's that's so awesome. Yeah, I mean, we have also weekly meetings with team members, and I think it's so important. I mean, I know some people do like daily huddles to get things moving at the beginning of each day, but at least having a weekly touch point with each key team members is so important. I want to go into now marketing a little bit and how you got your first few clients. So to start, you mentioned when you launched your business, you got one kind of big client, bigger than you expected or sooner than you expected. Can you just kind of walk us through, especially for those that might be at the early stages of their marketing, what did you do to get your first couple of clients coming in the door?
Yeah, so there's a few different things. One was that I had been building this machine kind of even before the firm had its own name and everything. And there was a lot of funny little connections that built up to that first client that I had that was kind of like a side gig, which was I was open to doing things that weren't necessarily my main skill set. I've always been a market intelligence insights person. But just based on other things I had done, for example, I had some expertise in SEO. And so I had some side clients where I was like, hey, I'll help you out with that when I was just trying to like make something on the side. And then because I was coming to it with this open mind, then they would be like, well, do you do this or do you do this? And then it really built into what I actually do. And then the other part of it was actually with this first very big client, honestly, a bit of a lucky break. I was working through Upwork, and I had a pretty strong profile. I have, 5 out of 5 stars, top rated. And I think that building that reputation, no matter where it is one of the big first pieces. Because once you have even those little trust indicators, if it's like you're promoting yourself as a freelancer, I just had another firm that was working with this big client come and say, hey, I'm looking for someone who does this sort of thing. And, I started to have conversations with this company, and it was just really clear that they were looking for exactly what I was. And I think one takeaway that people could have from that is being really clear about what you're great at and what your specialization is, and identifying that in potential clients is a big part of it, because there's plenty of people that I said no to before this big client. So when I'm looking at someone, I'm really evaluating, are they going to like my style of consulting? It's definitely kind of there's some people who will and some people who won't. Do they really need my services, or am I going to try and kind of like get into something where they really need something that's a little bit different? And I think that doing that helps you get that first client. And from there, it's a slow build. Slow, it's been 2 years for our company, but once you have that first client, as long as you're like starting to build those relationships everywhere else, that's going to really help as well.
So you started off, initial clients came through Upwork. Is that still part of the marketing strategy today? Get clients from Upwork, or is that no longer?
We try not to. Like, I definitely have a love-hate relationship with this platform. And I think that anyone who wants to supplement that with like an actual agency model does need to be careful. It takes a lot of it costs a bit more for you, like from a fee perspective and things like that. And there's a lot of people on there that have the wrong expectations. If they're actually looking for a consultant, they're much more looking for freelancers. But now we still have it as a minor supplement, but the majority of our new clients are either repeat clients. We have an 80% repeat rate with our clients, or referral. Okay.
Yeah, I want to get into the 80% repeat rate, because that's a pretty powerful metric, and says you're doing a really great job for your clients. But what are you doing today then? So if we put the Upwork kind of platform leads aside, where else are you getting leads from? What are you doing from a marketing perspective right now to to generate a pipeline of business?
So it's going to be kind of a sad thing for me to say for all the people who are listening for like the marketing tips, but really it's we don't really do a lot with marketing right now. We're just starting to get that engine built up. And it's repeat clients and referrals. So One thing is that we make the direct ask of previous clients. Hey, do you know another company that we could put you in contact with, or you could put us in contact with, that would be a good fit? And then always about 70% through a project, we're already talking to the client about the next project that we see for them. Or if it's something where we know it's like an annual survey and it's going to be a little while, we're already planting that seed of like, we have this availability, this is what we want to do next. And we're always talking like the relationship is going to continue. I think the other part is that like, I have a strong network from before I started this company, which makes it a lot easier. If you were starting from scratch and wanting to consult and hadn't had all of that time where you were working with other companies and have that network, it's a little bit more of a push to get to that next level.
And with your network, what are you doing to leverage it or to make sure that it's active or beneficial to you and to your company?
I stay in touch with people without a motive. So previous employees and bosses and other people that I consult when I was consulting at some of these other firms, I built some really strong friendships even with some of these past clients. And just nurturing that without the intention of selling to them immediately is a huge part of it, because then people and not like manipulating trust you, but like you have a good relationship with them. And so they'll think of you when they do have a project or they have someone who asks them about something.
You mentioned referrals and that you are active, which is fantastic because most people are very, they just kind of sit back and they're passive. And if a referral comes their way, they're happy with it, but they don't actually do anything to go out and get them. So you mentioned that you do actively go to your clients and say, hey, who else do you know that we might be able to work with, who could benefit from our services or expertise you can put us in touch with? When do you do that? Does that happen at the beginning of the relationship, halfway through a project, when a project is complete, or some other time?
We usually do when a project is complete. And one funny note is that a lot of times companies they won't refer us to someone. Instead, the way they respond to that ask is, no, I don't know anyone, but actually I want to do another project with you. So it can have a really powerful effect, even if you're, not actually getting that referral. But yeah, after the project, we usually make sure that everything's really wrapped up. And if it's something where they didn't already ask for another project, and then we reach out and just give them that ask.
So the referrals or asking for the referrals, you said sometimes that'll in itself create another project with that client because they go, yeah, like I don't want to connect you to anybody else, or I don't know anybody, but we actually have something else we want to work with you on. You also mentioned that you're always talking to clients as if you're just going to continue working with them into the future. And you're always talking about other ways that you can serve them and help them. So it sounds like that's leading to that 80% repeat rate with clients. Is there anything else that you do that you feel is a best practice or is just kind of part of your process to generate more repeat business from your clients?
I think that the asking for feedback is one of the pieces that, especially if you think a project isn't going well, is a really key part of that, because it opens up the dialogue both ways. And sometimes consultants aren't as open to feedback as we give a lot of feedback as consultants, but sometimes we're not as good as at receiving. I think that's one part. The other core part is to always set your expectations and reset them. And if you think that there isn't alignment, you get on the phone immediately with that client and you talk to them about it. It's pretty clear once you're a little bit practiced as a consultant when that slip is starting to happen. And a lot of times we just let it go, or we try and do something that's not necessarily going to solve the problem. And for me, it's been like, I see that someone in an email seems a little bit short with me. I'm like, we're getting on the phone right now. And I've had clients where I think it could have gone a completely different way and they could have been really dissatisfied, but because I was so committed to doing what was right for them and the relationship, even if it was uncomfortable for me at the time, I think that's a really core piece of consulting. And when you're a bigger company, it's the same thing. If you start to see that slip, or the consultants that are on that project see that, it's time to just realign.
Yeah, well, I'm really glad that you mentioned to pick up the phone and not just send an email, right, or respond by email. The phone is so powerful, and unfortunately, people are afraid to use it at times. As part of kind of this process that you have, like when do you mentioned that you solicit feedback, and there's one point where you think something might be going wrong, as you just mentioned. Is there any other time that you just are like intentionally soliciting feedback, or as part of the project process? So I'm just very interested in how you approach getting feedback from clients, because you're right, consultants are consistently providing feedback, recommendations, their opinion, their ideas, but they don't necessarily engage in, or they're not proactive in engaging in getting feedback from the client unless it's at the beginning of the project. So when do you do that? When do you find that it's best to do that?
It depends a bit on the type of project, typical consulting answer, but some of the projects feedback is just like part of the process. So when we're designing a survey, there's a few points that we already have it scheduled in where it's like, we sit down on the phone and we go, does this align? We said this was your goal. So for projects that are like that, then it's a built-in. If there's ever a point where I see those, like there's feedback coming back where I didn't expect it, or they're asking a lot of questions that make me think that maybe there's a misalignment, that's when I'll ask for feedback again. Also at the end of a project, when we send out our NPS survey, there's also a lot of opportunity there for them to give feedback. And depending on what they say there, if there's anything that I think is, surprising to me, for example, we had a client say something about, and this was a really minor feedback, but they're saying, oh, we were really struggling with like your document sharing practices. And so we asked them to, I got on a call, asked them to elaborate. And then I also sat down with our team and we had a strategy discussion about how could we make this process better? Is there anything that we're missing?
Awesome. Yeah, that's so great. I love those kinds of ideas as ways to just bring in kind of continuous improvement into the business. That's what makes business exciting in my mind, is that we can always find ways to improve. How do you approach pricing? It is like, what's the typical range of projects in terms of dollar value you take on? Are they like 5-figure projects, 6-figure projects, 7-figure projects? Kind of give us a sense of the range and scope of the projects that you take on.
It's definitely been the most chaotic part of our business so far, with the most learnings. I try and go on a project basis more than an hourly basis. And this is kind of blends into the rest of some of the strategies that I've talked about, where the sticker shock of a really highly expert, like insights consultant, can scare away a lot of people, unless it's a really big company that's used to working with some of those bigger firms. And that's what, we're worth and what we should be charging. But it's a lot easier to pitch some of those projects with, just like a flat rate. With the pricing, we've gone all over the place. So that's something that we've experimented with a lot since the start of the company. At first, we were trying to serve some smaller businesses as well as larger businesses, because I know that they are very underserved when it comes to analytics and marketing. So we had some smaller projects that were about like $1,000. Now that's very much not the case. We're really looking for those. We do some smaller projects that would be like above $8,000, but really our big money is like starting into the 6-figure range or a little bit lower. We still have some very competitive prices compared to a lot of other consulting firms with the same level, but we're also keep butting up against this, like it's too easy to sell projects. And this is something that my business coach pushes back on. If there's no objection about your price, then you're probably not charging enough. Right. And we've sold quite a few recently where we've been, they're just like, yep, let's do it. And we're like, okay. So I think there's a lot of learning there, and that's really a trial and error kind of process for us right now. Yeah. But some of the projects that we've been selling recently have been, about 6 figures, either in like a year-long engagement retainer sort of situation or a very big project.
Regarding data and analytics, is there anything that you feel the small like boutique consulting firm or even solo consultant could leverage or benefit from when it comes to data and analytics? Or in your mind, is it really more for a more established business with more moving parts and they're doing e-commerce? Like, is there any benefit that a small firm or independent consultant could actually get from data and analytics? As
like doing analytics consulting, or
like more for their own business?
Yes and no. That's always like one that it's interesting. It's like, when do you start to look at data?
Yeah.
And yes, in one of the types of projects that we've kind of started to offer is in the world of forecasting what's possible with your business. So running those numbers for you and saying, all right, theoreticals based on your goals, what can you do? And in that regard, if you can find a firm that can do that, it's super helpful. We've worked with a few startups that had some funding, and what we did was they had their goals and ideas of how much they were going to make, and we went and validated that. And that's super powerful. As far as looking at like your web data, I do think it's something where pragmatically, like, we don't even look at our own. We have analytics implemented on our website just because it's kind of one of the projects that I put the consultants through and things like that. But when you're really small, there's better time spent optimizing what will make a bit more of an impact, which is like, all right, if I'm really good at calculating my capacity, which you might not think of as data and analytics, I'm going to be way more successful. If I'm really good at forecasting how much I really can make and then breaking down how much I can invest in, equipment and marketing and things like that, that's where you're using data to be really clever as a small firm or an independent consultant, because those are the things that you can tweak and make a really big impact. But if you're going to focus on like, oh no, my 20 visitors to my website, like it's less than last week, it's not, enough data yet.
Yeah, no, I think it's like vanity metrics, right? People get so caught up in looking at how many followers they have on Twitter or Facebook or like, their website visitors, and none of that really moves the needle, right? It's all about having conversations and these other areas that are going to create a lot more value in your business. And I really like that you talked about this idea of modeling what's possible. It's something that we've done with a lot of clients as they're kind of getting more established and seeing more success. If they want to reach, let's say they have a goal of reaching $1 million a year. Okay, well, that's great. Well, what would your business look like or need to look like if you want to reach 1.5 or 2 million? And sometimes just that exploration, kind of creative thinking, can get you to start seeing all kinds of things about your business that you didn't see before, whether it's how many team members do you need, or what service offerings, or what price point. So I think it's a great reminder and exercise for people to go through. So before we wrap up, MaryBeth, I want to ask you a few additional questions here. The first is, when you look at kind of like everything that you do on a regular basis, a daily basis, you're doing thought leadership on LinkedIn and other places, you're managing your team, you're doing client work, so all that stuff. Is there a habit or a ritual or something that you do on a regular basis that you feel really leads to the higher levels of performance or productivity, or has a big impact on the success that you're able to create on a regular basis?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of habits, and I think that's a really smart way to say it, is that your environment leads to the excellence. So there's a lot of things that I do in my like off time, and I try and do all of those things that you just mentioned within a regular work week. I don't work more than 40 hours a week on a standard week. It's going to sound really boring, but if you can do these basics correctly, that's really what leads to being able to balance all of this work, which is, I work out 5 days a week. I schedule that in my calendar. I rely on my calendar to book out when I'm doing not only meetings, but also the tasks. So I'm looking at everything that I need to do, and there's a block in time for designing LinkedIn posts, and there's a block of time for my consulting work, so that I'm making sure I can realistically fit things in. And that also goes to just taking care of myself as a person as a whole and creating that balance. It's really hard to be 70 to 80% billable and run a team and do all of that if you're not eating healthy and sleeping enough. And so, I sacrifice some things that I don't really consider a sacrifice anymore, that you may have to do if you want to work at that level, which is, I don't go out to bars on the weekend, and I don't, I don't stay up too late and things like that, everyone's like, gonna be like, oh yeah, but have you really tried to do that? That's really what comes down to, is taking care of yourself so that you can take care of your team and your company.
Yeah, it sounds like you're very clear on your priorities, and I feel it always starts with that. If you're clear on what's really important to you and why you're doing what you're doing, then it's much easier to have your actions follow along with that. And in the last 6 months, what's the best book that you have read or listened to? Can be fiction or nonfiction, just anything that you would recommend.
Okay, so I don't remember the author off the top of my head, so maybe we can like drop it in the comments or whatever when you do the podcast, but there's a book that's very short called Great Leaders Make Sure Monday Mornings Don't Suck. And I would recommend that as like one of the main leadership books that anyone really, and it really fits for consulting as well, to understand like how your abilities as a strategic leader go beyond your area of expertise, and just being a good person and focusing on making a good experience for people is going to make a lot bigger difference than just coming from your expertise.
Is that Eric Harkins?
I think so, but don't quote me on that one. I don't remember exactly who it was.
I just pulled up when you're speaking. It says great leaders. Yeah, make sure Monday morning doesn't suck, or something like that. So
yeah, something like that.
Okay, we'll try and have that and linked up in the show notes. Hopefully that's correct. MaryBeth, thank you so much for coming on here today. I want to make sure that people can learn more about you, your company, your work. Where's the one place that we should send people?
Definitely send to my LinkedIn profile, MaryBeth Maskovas, or insightlimeanalytics.com is another place to learn more about our company.
Fantastic. Again, MaryBeth, thanks so much. Yeah.
Thank you. It was great.